Mr. Diddy.
Simba production. Where we strive to blow up your old paradigms.
Yep. We are in Simba land. You can hear the drum in the background. Listen. Drum call. People are moving towards the tree of life to pour libations. But what I'm gonna do is keeping with the theme I started yesterday. Yesterday I read Frederick Douglass. Today I got some Marcus Garvey for you. So we're gonna read a speech by Marcus Garvey, see how it relates to the day, and I'm gonna go right on here and catch these libations. All right, let me change the setting on my mic. Sorry about that. So now it'll be focused on me. So let's go and let's look at Marcus Mosiah Garvey. This was a speech given on July 8th, 1917. The East St. Louis riots, or rather massacre, of Monday, July 2nd, will go down in history as one of the bloodiest outrages against mankind for which any class of people could be held guilty. This is no time for fine words, but a time to lift one's voice against the savagery of a people who claim to be dispensers of democracy. I do not know what special meaning the people who slaughtered the Negroes of East St. Louis have for democracy, of which they are the custodians, but I do know that it has no literal meaning for me as used and applied by the same lawless people. America, that has been ringing the bells of the world, proclaiming to the nations and the people thereof that she has democracy to give to all and sundry. America, that has denounced Germany for the deportation of the Belgians into Germany. America, that has arraigned Turkey at the bar of public opinion and public justice against the massacre of the Americans, has herself no satisfaction to give 12 million of her own citizens except the satisfaction of a partial inquiry that will end where it begun, over the brutal murder of men, women, and children for no other reason than that they are black people seeking an industrial chance in a country that they have labored for 300 years to make great. For 300 years, the Negroes of America have given their lifeblood to make the Republic the first among the nations of the world. And all along this time, there has never been even 1 year of justice, but on the contrary, a continuous round of oppression. At one time, it was slavery. At another time, lynching and burning. And up to date is wholesome wholesale butchering. This is a crime against the laws of humanity. It is a crime against the laws of the nation. It is a crime against nature and a crime against the God of all mankind. Somewhere in the books of life, we are told that God created of one blood all nations of men to dwell on the face of the earth. And after mankind in scattered groups had for thousands of years lived in their own spheres without trouble or molestation, promoting in their own way the course of peace and happiness, the white race, a party of this group, went out to enslave, conquer, and rob the rights of the peaceful. Through that system of enslavement, conquest, and robbery, the black man was taken into this country where he was forced against his will to labor for the enrichment of the white man. Millions of our people in the early days of slavery gave their lives that America might live. From the labors of these people, the country grew in power until her wealth today is computed above that of any two nations. With all the services that the Negro gave, he still is despised creature in the eyes of the white people. For if he were not to them despised, then 900 million of whites of this country would never allow such outrages as the East St. Louis massacre to perpetrate themselves without enforcing the law which provides justice for every man, be he black or white. The black man has always trusted the white man. He has always clung to him as a brother, ever willing to do service for him, to help him, to succor him. Yet with all this, the white man has never found it convenient to live up to the principles of brotherhood which he himself teaches to all mankind. From the time of Livingston to the present day, the black man has always been kind to the white man. When there was no white man in Africa to help the sickly and dying Livingston, the black man, ever true, even as Simon and the Syrian was true, in bearing the cross of the despised Jesus, came to the rescue of the suffering Englishman. And when he was dead, faithful as they were, they bore his body for hundreds of miles across the deserts and plains of Africa until they deposited his remains at the place where other white men could reach him to convey him to England and inter his bones in the Cathedral of Westminster Abbey. The Negro in American history, from the time of Crispus Attucks at Boston, the 10th Cavalry at San Juan Hill, was saved the day for Roosevelt, up to the time when they stuck to Boyd at Carrizal has demonstrated to the American nation that he is true as steel. Yet for all his service, he receives the reward of lynching, burning, and wholesale slaughter. It is even strange to see how the real American white people, the people who are direct descendants from the Pilgrim Fathers, allow the alien Germans, the Italians, and other Europeans who came here but yesterday to lead them in bloody onslaught against the Negroes who have lived here for over 300 years. When I say that the aliens are leading the descendants of the Pilgrims Fathers against the Negroes in this country, I mean to support it with as much fact as possible. Mayor Bowman of East St. Louis, if not himself a German descendant of German immigrants, he is the man to be blamed for the recent rise in East St. Louis. I say so because I am convinced that he fostered a well-arranged conspiracy to prevent black men migrating from the South, much the loss of Southern farmers who for months have been moving heaven, it seems, to prevent the exodus of the labor serfs of the South into the North. 2 months ago, I was in New Orleans completing a lecture tour of the United States, and on the 26th of April, Mayor Fred W. Mifflin arrived in the city on a trip from St. Louis and New Orleans. He was met by Mayor Berman and the New Orleans Board of Trade for months. The farmers of Louisiana were frightened out of their wits over the everyday migration of Negroes from great farming centers of the state. They wrote to the papers, they appealed to the governor, the mayor, and the legislator, and the Board of Trade to stop the Negroes from going away. But up to the 26th of April, nothing was done to stop the rush of people obtaining passage on the trains by railway orders sent to them from the north. At this time, Mayor Moman arrived, and the farmers and Board of Trade met him and asked his help in discouraging the Negroes from going north, and especially to East St. Louis. In an interview given out to the New Orleans press, he said that Negroes from the South were reaching St. Louis at the rate of 2,000 per week, and that they were creating a problem there. He said that some of the largest industries in the country were established in East St. Louis, and there were strikes for the last few months. He believed that labor conditions in East St. Louis were responsible for the number of Negro laborers going to the city. When the strike started, he said United States District Judge Wright issued an injunction restraining strikers from intimidating the laborers who took their places. The order prevented uprisings and riots. Conditions are very bad in East St. Louis, he said, because many plants are suffering from want of labor. However, our city is growing, and we have a population of 85,000 persons. During 1916, we gained 1,600 in population. His interview did not make pleasant reading for the farmers and others interested in labor in New Orleans and Louisiana, so that the very next day he appeared at the Board of Trade, where he met the farmers and others, and in discussing the labor exodus with them, he going into East St. Louis as the city did not want them. His interview on the first day was an encouragement to the Negroes to go to East St. Louis as labor. On the second day, when he was approached, he said East St. Louis did not want the Negroes, and then promised to do all in his power to prevent them going there. His remarks to the people whom he met was published under big headlines in the newspaper, so the Negroes could read that they were not wanted in East St. Louis. But that did not deter the black men of Louisiana who were looking for better opportunities in the land of their birth. Going and Jim Crowism. The Negroes still continued their immigration north. The mayor of East St. Louis returned to the city after making his promise to the farmers. Board of Trade, and others who were interested in Negro labor. On the 5th of May, the New Orleans Board of Trade elected Mr. M.J. Sanders as president and Mr. W.P. Ross as delegates to attend a transportation conference at St. Louis to be held on May 8th and 9th. You remember that Mayor Moulman appeared before the Board of Trade on Friday the 27th of April, where he made this statement of promise. The transportation conference was held at St. Louis on the 8th and 9th of May, at which several prominent men interested in labor condition of the South were presented, as also Messer, Sanders, and Ross from New Orleans. It isn't for me to suggest that Mayor Moulman met these gentlemen again. It is for you to imagine what further transpired while these gentlemen from the South, who were so deeply interested in keeping the Negro below the Mason-Dixon line, said and did among themselves while in the vicinity where Mayor Moulman held sway, so much so as to be able to make a promise to keep out citizens of the United States who were not born in Germany, but in the Southland. One thing I do now know, the first riot started on May 28th after a conference of labor leaders with Mayor Moulman, that the labor agents had induced Negroes to come from the South. I can hardly see the relevance of such a report with the dragging of men from cars and shooting them. The city authorities did nothing to demonstrate to the unreasonable labor leaders that they would be firmly dealt with should they maltreat black men. No threat was offered to these men because which I will read, will speak for itself. Negroes asked to stay away. Baton Rouge, Louisiana, May 30th. An order advising all Louisiana Negroes to remain away from East St. Louis, Illinois, was issued today by Governor Pleasant, following a request from Mayor Moulman of the city of Illinois. I have not seen the Louisiana paper that published that order, but you can imagine for yourself how the papers made prominent news of it so as to bring home to the Negroes of the state that the very discouraging situation which the mayor of East St. Louis helped to create, because nothing was done to at 100. They reached this total partly through reports shot, burnt in buildings, or murdered and thrown into the Mississippi. The exact number of dead will probably never be known. Six Negroes were hanged to telegraph poles in the south end of town. A reliable white man reports having counted 19 Negro corpses on the side of the street. A reign of terror prevails. The police and the tow companies of the National Guard are powerless. The companies of soldiers were powerless as they had orders not to shoot. The whites took their rifles from them, telling them that they might hurt someone whilst these very whites took the rifles and shot Negroes. The whole thing, my friend, is a bloody farce, and that the police and soldiers did nothing to stem the murder thirst of the mob is a conclusive proof of conspiracy on the part of the civil shot at the young Amazon. Suddenly, the crowd swept from the trail of the girls. A yell then arose, "There is one." It was a Negro walking on the railroad track. Before he realized his peril, he was killed. Half a dozen pistols cracked, and the man dropped without a chance to run. Two white girls, neither more than 17 years old, the report said, were cheered when they dragged the colored girl from a streetcar, removed her slippers, and beat senseless with sharp wooden heels. Some reports said black women were stripped by white blood of Negroes, encouraged as they were by the German-American mayor, who 2 months ago went to New Orleans and promised to keep the Negroes out of East St. Louis. That this man did absolutely nothing to let the people know that the law would be enforced to preserve order and ensure the peaceful lives of the black people was amply demonstrated by a report which comes from East St. Louis and was published in the New York Tribune on Saturday, July 7th. Under the caption, "Citizen blame long reign of lawlessness for riots." The paper published this bit of news. East St. Louis, Illinois, July 6, resignation of Chief of Police Payne of East St. Louis and Cornelius Hickey, Night Chief of Police, or of the radical reforms will be demanded of Mayor Moman by the Citizens Committee of the Chamber of Commerce. This determination is the result of the race riots here Monday, which 37 persons lost their lives. Maurice Joyce, Vice President of the Chamber of Commerce, declared today that the rioting was the direct result of a long reign of lawlessness in East St. Louis. We have a police department that is incompetent and inefficient, if not worse. Not only was the word sent out that the law would not be rigidly enforced, but the impression was allowed to spread that law violations will be winked at. The gallant vice chairman of the Chamber of Commerce, who knew this even before one Negro was shot, never said a word and did nothing to bring the delinquent mayor who rules, never said a word and did nothing to bring the delinquent mayor who rules the city to a realization of these facts until the great property damage was done to the Southern Railway Company, when their warehouse of over 100 carloads of merchandise was consumed by the flames, causing a loss to the company of over $500,000, and a white theater for over $100,000 was destroyed. It was not until that he would keep Negroes out of East St. Louis. He has succeeded in driving fully 10,000 in one day out of the city, and the South has gone wild over the splendid performance, and so much so that the very next day after the massacre, the legislature of Georgia sent out the message that their good Negroes must come home, as they will treat them better than East St. Louis did. Can you wonder at the conspiracy of the whole affair? White people are taking advantage of black men today because black men all over the world are disunited. All right, that was a speech by Marcus Garvey. Now, I got a question. I just have to look something up because it's talking about East St. Louis, July 8th. Actually, he said that the riot took place on July 2nd. I want to look up. No, that was in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Okay, cool. All right. So anyway, we hear the words of Marcus Garvey. I'm saluting the ancestors in my own way. So tomorrow, I'm going to pick somebody else. I might do another Frederick Douglass one because I want to do the speech where he talks about those who want freedom. But, you know, the one about the waves crashing and the thunderclap. I mean, Frederick Douglass was a good speaker. So maybe I'll read another one of his, or I might find Malcolm X, or I might find Martin Luther King. Who knows? Find a speech. But, yo, this is Brother Hatim. I'd like to thank you for listening, those of you that are listening. And keep up because we will be having a morning ritual this morning. So hopefully I'll be able to send that up. And other than that, all I can say is peace.